Trustee Kammer? Carbonaro?
Here.
Daney?
Here.
Gabrenia?
Here.
Hopkins?
Here.
Ranky?
Here.
President Wallace?
Here. We requested that Pastor Fueling from Village Church of Bartlett do our invocation this evening. Pastor Fueling?
Please stand if you're able. Pray with me. Father, many of us in this room have had a great privilege, been given a great privilege from you to lead, to steward not just resources but people. And this is a high honor and we don't take it lightly. And so God, this evening we come before you and we confess that we need your mind, we need your heart, we need your wisdom. Most importantly, we need your will. Wherever your will is done, communities and families and individuals flourish, and that is our desire for this village of Bartlett. And so, God, I pray for each of the men and women here today that you would do just that. Would you give them your wisdom, and would you give them your will? We pray this in the name of Jesus. Amen?
Amen.
Amen. Thank you.
Thank you, Pastor Fueling. Pledge allegiance to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all. Brings us to the consent agenda this evening. All items listed with an asterisk on the consent agenda will be considered enacted in one motion. There'll be no further discussion on items on the consent agenda. At this point, is there any board member that would like to move anything to a consent agenda?
Yes, I would like to move E1 to the consent agenda.
Anybody have any issues with that? E1. And that is it. So I'll entertain a motion to amend the consent agenda this evening to include the following. The consent agenda will include the minutes from the board and committee minutes October 17, 2017. The consent agenda will include the bills list from November 7, 2017. The consent agenda under planning and zoning will include municipal code text amendment, update of Title III, Chapter 22, amplifiers, Section 2, amplifier regulations. The consent agenda will also include, we'll be adding under the Police and Health Committee, a resolution approving of the purchase of Space Saver mobile storage system for the new police station, new police building, and the contract with Bradford Systems Corporation through the National Intergovernmental Purchasing Alliance. The consent will also include under Police and Health Municipal Code Amendment, update of Title VI, Chapter 11 through 1300, stopping, standing, and parking. The consent will also include Municipal Code Amendment, update of Title I, Chapter 4, General Penalty. The consent this evening will also include under Public Works Committee, an intergovernmental agreement with DuPage County for the implementation of the National Pollutant Discharge Elimination System program.
So moved.
Second. Moved by Trustee Daney, seconded by Trustee Kammer. Will the clerk please call the roll?
Trustee Carbonaro?
Yes.
Daney?
Yes.
Gabrenia?
Yes.
Hopkins?
Yes.
Ranky?
Yes.
Kammer?
Yes.
The motion carries. I'll now entertain a motion to approve the amended consent agenda.
So moved. Second.
Moved by Trustee Kammer, seconded by Trustee Carbonaro. Will the clerk please call the roll?
Trustee Daney? Daney?
Yes.
Gabrenia?
Yes.
Hopkins?
Yes.
Ranky?
Yes.
Kammer?
Yes.
Carbonaro?
Yes.
That motion carries. Next item is our treasurer's report. There's none this evening. Moving on to the president's report. We had a recommended person to be appointed to the Bike and Run Plan Advisory Committee. This gentleman submitted their information, and we put it past Chairman Kammer, who I believe spoke with him, reviewed the application. So at this point, if there's no objection, I intend to appoint John Getz. Are you here tonight, John? Yes, to the Bike and Run Committee. So if nobody has any objections, I hereby so appoint you to that.
So if you'll appoint, then we need a motion to consent.
We'll need a motion to consent the appointment.
So moved. Second.
Moved by Trustee Daney, seconded by Trustee Carbonaro. Will the clerk please call the roll?
Trustee Gabrenia?
Yes.
Hopkins?
Yes.
Ranky?
Yes.
Kammer?
Yes.
Carbonaro?
Yes.
Daney.
Yes.
That motion carries. Thank you for serving on that committee. We really appreciate your time. Next item we have this evening is a presentation from Lauterbach and Auditors. So with that, I will turn it over to our friends at Lauterbach.
Thank you. My name is Jamie Wilkie. I am one of the audit partners with Lauterbach and Amen. So we have this evening for you the review of the annual financial report for the fiscal year ended April 30th, 2017. I heard you're all now electronic, so I believe I have worked with Todd to bookmark each of the sections that we'll briefly review this evening. So if you go along with me, we should be at each bookmark, and I'll as well provide page number reference at the bottom. First of all, I'd like to thank Todd and the rest of his team. This is a fairly intense process that actually started in the month of April. Obviously coming to a conclusion this evening with the submission of the final audited financial statements. That process certainly does not take place, especially under a clean audit opinion, without the coordinated efforts of staff. So they really do an excellent job preparing for the audit and providing all of that necessary information. So thank you, Todd, and to your team. Our first bookmark should be a copy of the Certificate of Achievement for Excellence in Financial Reporting. Just a reminder, that is a third-party independent review of the annual financial statements. It is really the highest level reporting we can have in the government world. So the village did in fact receive that award for last year's audit. We have again submitted this year's audit to the award, obviously anticipating receipt for this year's audit as well. The next bookmark should reflect our actual audit opinion. As I stated, it was a clean opinion, or what we call an unmodified opinion. That is the highest level we are able to issue. That does reflect the financial statements being materially correct. Okay? Included in our audit process is an assessment of the internal control environment. So certainly if there were internal control related issues that we identified, those would be brought forth to the board this evening. I am happy to report that we did not in fact have any of those. So again, a very clean audit process. The next bookmark should reflect the section labeled Management's Discussion and Analysis. You'll find 13 pages provided within this section of the report. I know it's a large document. There are a lot of numbers and disclosures to try to get through. Within these 13 pages, management, in fact, has worked to capture some of those key transactions and really provide an executive level summary to the audit. So I always encourage the boards to read those 13 pages in detail. Just looking at results of operations in the general fund, if we go to your next bookmark, that should be page 72 of the audit document. Being that the general fund is the largest operating fund of the village, just to point out a very high level, the actual results for the year. So if we look towards the bottom of that page, third line up from the bottom, you should see a number in the actual column of a decrease of about $362,000 in overall fund balance. So that is in fact the final net profit or loss for the fiscal year. I just want to point out that was actually better than budgetary expectations, so we actually were anticipating about $1 million decrease for the year. Okay? Most of that is really coming on the expenditure kind of cost controlling side of things. And the last section within the audited financial statements I want to point out should be our next bookmark, and that's provided on page 116. Page 116 through the rest of the large CAFR document provides what we call our statistical section. This is where you'll find all kinds of 10-year trend information, financial data, property tax information, long-term debt activity, really a wealth of information at the back of the report. So if you're curious what historical data might look like for 5 or 10 years ago, that's where you'll find that information within the report. I would be certainly happy to answer any questions on the audit itself. I believe you have the management letter with those recommendations as your next item, but certainly if there's any questions on the numbers or disclosures, I would be happy to answer those at this time.
Anybody have any questions when they're reviewing this?
Nope.
It's such fun reading.
It's very easy reading, right?
I do have one question.
Sure.
I wonder if you could help me balance my checking account?
Would it be terrible to say I don't do my own? That's left to the husband. I do want to point out we had two, what I would consider housekeeping type recommendations this year within the management letter, which I believe is your last bookmark within our section here this evening. We have a Governmental Accounting Standards Board statement that is coming, or GASB. GASB is our standard setting authority that we have to adhere to when we report governmental financial statements. They have been very active as of the last decade, kind of keeping us on our toes with reporting requirements. So we do have a new standard coming down the line. It's effective for the village for the April 30th, 2019 fiscal year end, so we have a couple of years left. But GASB is really targeting post-retirement healthcare costs. So the concept of retirees piggybacking on the village's health insurance plan. So we've always, in theory, disclosed that information, but we've actually never calculated the long-term liability and had to put that on the balance sheet on the face of the financial statements. So we'll be working with staff to ask questions about census data, premium structures, et cetera, to then work to establish what that potential liability could be going forward. The second item then, again, just a housekeeping item. We had a couple of funds at the end of the fiscal year that, based on final results for the year, actually fell below their said requirements in your policy with regards to minimum reserves. So we had 3 funds that were under those reserve minimum requirements. I think in all 3 cases, we have, management action plans moving forward to kind of get those funds back to the levels that have been established within the village's policy. Okay. So again, no internal control issues, a very clean audit process, and we certainly appreciate the opportunity this evening to present the audit.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Quick question on the fund balance policy.
Sure.
Is that something that you evaluated also?
I'm sorry, what was your question?
So you said you noted a couple of funds were under the fund balance policy. Did you also look at the policy itself?
Yes, and we do review the policy. So what I can tell you is one of the funds that's on that list is the golf course fund. And so I can tell you other communities and park district clients that have golf courses. At some point in time, we may need to look and readdress the policy itself to say, is it still reasonable to attain those goals that we're looking at? Golf is a good example, only because the golf industry has changed fairly dramatically over the last decade. So that, in fact, can be a discussion with staff, going forward. But yes, we do review that periodically through our process.
And you found our policies to be reasonable?
Yes, yes.
Any other questions? Thank you so much.
Thank you, appreciate it.
Well, in lieu of going through each one of our chairmen, actually, we have question and answer. Any questions for the staff at this time? The biggest question is, did everybody watch Iowa beat the heck out of Ohio State? That's the biggest. That should be the biggest question we have for staff.
I know at the last board meeting, we had some questions about the health insurance, and I saw the email that was approved, or that we renewed the policy. Where did we finally come in number-wise?
Where did we finally come in number-wise?
Well, how much is it going to cost?
Oh, I didn't bring it with me. Janelle, do you have the number? The final cost of, oh, you sent it in there. I don't have it. You sent it to me. Okay, let me just pull it up.
Okay.
Circle back.
So, but I'm assuming that it's in the same general area that you had projected, and we don't need to vote on that at all.
We've not voted on that in the past, so I didn't believe that we needed to bring it to the.
That's a renewal situation. If it
Yeah.
goes past renewal, you're uninsured.
Well, right, but we've never. So that's more of a village attorney question, because I don't recall ever voting on the renewal. And if it's $3.1 million, that's a pretty big ticket item that we're not voting on.
Right. I don't, I'd have to look at the actual renewal document. Staff did.
The budget, the insurance costs are part of the overall budget that you vote on.
Yeah,
Okay,
it's not
That's
separated
where we
out.
That's where we cover that.
okay.
And once
I'm
you,
sorry, I don't have that number with me again.
once we approve the budget, you're approving all the expenses in that budget.
Right, but if we enter, well, yes, but we enter into contracts and, expenditures have to be approved, and I'll let Brian chime in on that component of it, but I think the taxpayers would expect us to vote on something like that, especially when it's so big.
I would have to agree with that.
Well, you essentially are if you're voting on the budget. So when we're evaluating the budget during this budgeting season, you're going to see a number in there for health insurance. And that's the time that we have to evaluate. You can't just turn around and get a new budget or new expense quote for health insurance for hundreds of people without having some time.
Right, but I mean, it's one of those things that we've talked about every year for the last 4 years, and it always seems like it just kind of happens automatically.
And it's tight. Right. That is the case because it's in the budget. I looked at that when staff was going over the document. It's simply the renewal of the existing, plan. There wasn't changes. We can look at that next year if there's a way to take the actual, it wasn't a contract per se, so I don't recall. There is a you're renewing the same insurance. So we'll take a look at that. We'll bring back the document next year so the board is actually, if it is indeed a separate contract, and the renewal is a renewal of a contract per se, certainly bring that back.
Okay, yeah, I mean, because I understand the mayor's point that.
Yeah, it's in the budget.
Right, it's in the budget that we've already done this, and I understand that, but moving forward, it seems like we have this conversation every year, and it's never really
And I think we
happens,
have to
so.
start the process sooner because of with insurance, the time windows within which you have to act.
Sure.
And I will, let me give you that number that you were looking for. The cost is $261,631.94. That is the increase that we will be experiencing. So the dollar amount we current pay, that's the cost per month. The $261,631.94 is the cost per month.
Okay, thank you.
Which is a conglomeration of other contracts, because you've got your union contracts covering a large percentage of the employees, but there is that third
And at the
uncovered.
last meeting, we committed to continue to look at those percentages and the structure and bring that back to you for policy direction on the structure of the plan and the costs and the percentages. And we haven't stopped doing that. I'm meeting on Monday with another broker, with Janelle. We're also continuing to look at the pooling option once we've gone through renewal and have an actual picture of what our employee composite is. So we won't get caught in the time crunch that we did this time because we're not stopping. We're continuing the analysis so it can come to you in time for you to actually have input.
Okay, thank you for your work. I know it's not easy.
When does the current policy start?
December 1, right?
December 1?
And we are seeing a 13% increase?
12 and a half.
13 what? Janelle, just come up, okay?
Yeah.
Get a lot easier.
Okay. This year's increase is a 15.8% increase in the health insurance. That's health insurance.
And the budget that we approved accounted for the 15% increase?
The budget is, yeah, this health insurance will start most of the way through the year, so it's partial, but we do factor in renewals in the annual budget.
I just want to make sure it's in the budget that it was going to go up 15%.
We didn't actually know what the actual policy was, but we should still be within budget.
Okay. Thank you.
What's the rule of thumb, Todd, for increasing costs like that renew every year? I mean, you did, especially health insurance, you increased it 10% in the budget and hope for?
We do use past experience, right, as far as going forward. The way that we allocate the actual expenses, though, is a little different. We use more of averages per each employee for each department, and so there's a little bit of wiggle room.
So you drill down a little bit more. Yeah. I think it's a valid point, especially when we get into budgeting this year, because of the fact that the expenses are so out of control in health insurance, that we'll be highlighting that in January and February in our discussions. And by that time, staff will have plenty of information about options, right? Great.
Thank you.
Any other questions? Brings us to the town hall. Anyone like to address the board at this time? Please step up to the podium, state your name and address, and please keep your comments to 3 minutes or less. Anybody like to address the board this evening?
Good evening. Hi, my name is John Elenardo with Frederick Quinn Company. I'm working on your... Is that better? Okay, I'm sorry. Usually people can hear me, but it's different. So...
the heat's on now.
I know. I just want to come by and just give you a little update on what's going on. If you had an opportunity to see the building site before the sunset, you'll see that the structural steel is being installed. So that started on Monday of that week. It's a milestone for us to get that going, a big step towards getting the building enclosed during the winter. So that activity was scheduled to start last Friday, and with a slight delay, we pushed it back to Monday to get it started on Monday. So they'll continue working on that over the course of the next several weeks. And in the next week, in conjunction with structural steel, we'll go back to working on some structural concrete and some other activities in the basement of the building that can go ahead and work with the structural steel contractor once he gets about a 1-week head start. So things are moving along in the building as we expected. In my update to you, I did note that just like most people in construction over the course of the month of October, we lost a couple of days to rain, so we worked a couple of Saturdays to make up for those days and to do the best we can to make up for the lost time. Be happy to answer any questions if you have any about what's going on out there.
So is the plan to have the shell up before the winter hits?
We need to get under roof while we can, while the weather allows, so that we can keep going on the inside, yes.
Good.
Thank you.
Thanks. Thanks for being here tonight. Would anybody else like to address the board at this time? Hearing none, we'll move on to our standing committee reports. And in lieu of me calling each chairman's name and them telling me they have nothing on their agenda, I will just confirm that each item on our agenda this evening under standing committee reports was either nothing on the report or it was on the consent agenda. So with that, the attorney's not liking that.
No,
We'll move on to new business.
Oh. Okay.
Any new business, other than the insurance stuff that you guys are working on? Any questions?
I have a question. I know a couple of residents have reached out to me about the Spalding and Lambert quiet zone. I don't know if staff can get kind of creative maybe with some of their approaches with the salvage company over there. I know, I think the biggest complaint right now is the noise from the intercom system. And I know it's unincorporated, so our hands are kind of tied, but if staff can kind of maybe think of some solutions to that intercom system over there.
I had been in conversations with Bill, who owns the auto towing place, and every time we get a complaint, I call him up and say, you know, can you turn down the volume or redirect the speakers? And he's pretty cooperative and does it. I know that certain times, prevailing winds, you know, quiet times out there, that it is loud. I've heard it. I mean, our police go by there. Short of figuring out a way where he can communicate in his yard without having that intercom, which I think he's heading towards, because he wants to build a new building and kind of enclose some of the sales. I think that's probably the best that I can suggest. He is cooperative. When I do call him, he's sorry it offends or causes noise to people, but we do get complaints, and we address them as we get them.
Okay. Thank you, Jim.
Jim, do we have all three sides of that plot?
Our property, or the village corporate limits, is on the north and the east side. And actually, some of it is on the south side too, because we have Tovar. So when you go west, that kind of gets into the unincorporated area where he's at. You know, we've looked at, I don't know if we wanted to get into a situation, it'd be, you know, and Brian knows about annexations and forced annexations, and I don't know if we can do that with him with that one open area there. And I don't know if we necessarily want it in there, because I always encourage him to find a bigger site elsewhere. But not that I don't like the guy, but he is kind of outgrowing his space that he has there. So, and he has looked at other locations.
Okay. Thank you. Anything else? With that, I'll entertain a motion to adjourn.
So moved.
Second.
Moved by trustee Hopkins, seconded by trustee Daney. Will the clerk please call the roll?
Trustee Cammer?
Yes.
Carbonaro?
Yes.
Daney?
Yes.
Cabrera?
Yes.
Hopkins?
Yes.
Ranky?
Yes.
We are adjourned.